Finally, proof that Canada isn't the most dysfunctional British colony on the planet. Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. I hope you're having a great day. Well, on Thursday the 14th, the New Zealand Parliament had a bit of a ruckus. This is the first time I have actually ever seen anything happen in the New Zealand Parliament. I've not followed it, but I had to find the original footage to go back and take a look at this because I thought it was just quite interesting to find a British colony that is actually more screwed up than Canada. Let's take a look at what happened in the Parliament and then we'll talk about it.
Te Pāti Maori.
E ono ngā pōti e whakahe. Kawana! Ka whakamanu whiriti a koe au! Kamate, kamate,
The House is suspended until the ringing of the bells. The gallery is to be cleared.
Now, if that just isn't the silliest thing that I've seen in a while, I'm going to play this one more time because the parliamentary cameras focused in on the speaker once the disturbance started, but there were other angles that actually showed the disturbance on the floor, and I think that it's worthwhile to kind of take a look at.
E ono ngā pōti e whakahe. Kawana! Ka whakamanu whiriti a koe au! Kamate, kamate,
The House is suspended until the ringing of the bells. The gallery is to be cleared.
Now, that's not the only interesting angle. There was another one which I felt was really hilarious, but it involved a remix where they put some music behind it. So if I play it, then I'll get a copyright strike or something, whatever. So I'm not going to play it. But basically, they showed the scene with some 1925 jazz music playing in the background and all these people with their jazz hands going. It was actually pretty hilarious. So they cleared the gallery. Obviously, you saw the people dancing in the gallery and doing the stomping and the whatnot. So they cleared the gallery. What you might not know is there's actually a Canadian politician in the gallery. She was from the Northwest Territories. She was introduced earlier on in the day. I can't remember what her name was, but she was in the gallery. So we had a Canadian connection there. What led up to this outburst? Well, there's a few things that were happening. First off, the outburst came as a result of a bill that was introduced by a fella named David Seymour. And David Seymour is a member of the ruling party or the government, but it's not a very powerful government. It's a coalition government. He is introducing a bill to recognize certain principles of a treaty that had been signed 200 years previous. So a little bit of background on this, and I apologize if I get any of the details wrong, but here's my understanding. And again, not an expert, so I may get a few details wrong. The Maori people were basically Polynesians who colonized New Zealand and a whole bunch of islands around 700, 800 years ago, something like that. Some people think that they were the original inhabitants, so that the islands weren't inhabited prior to them arriving, but other people think that maybe there were some people there and they conquered them. Now, they were fairly brutal when they went there, for sure, because there were a pacifist group of islanders in adjacent islands around New Zealand that the Maoris took over. And they enslaved those people. They massacred a whole bunch of them. They cannibalized a whole bunch of those people that they massacred. And they bartered or they traded with the severed heads of these people. Okay, fair enough. That happened so long ago, it's ancient history. Okay, but they came to the island of New Zealand probably 500 years prior to the Brits. So the Brits arrived and colonized New Zealand. How they did it, whether it was non-violent, violent, I don't know. I don't know the history. But at some point, they entered into this treaty with the Maori people, essentially acknowledging Maori rights over their land. But apparently it wasn't very detailed. There wasn't a lot of substance in this. It was just one of these, okay, we recognize you were here first and we want you to be part of this new society, this new colony, and an agreement was struck. But there wasn't a lot of detail there. In 1975, they tried to rectify that, but things really weren't spelled out a whole lot better. Over the next 50 years, since 1975, the courts have made all of these rulings on this treaty and on these rights. Fair enough, that's a legal system, right? But the Parliament has been largely silent on that issue. So this fella, David Seymour, decides he is going to write a bill which codifies these rights. What he's saying is he's writing essentially a human rights bill or a bill of rights that recognizes all New Zealanders have the same rights under the law and have the right to be treated equally under the law. Now, what that does with the other treaty rights, I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. I don't know if this is a good piece of legislation or a bad piece of legislation. The fact is that except for the ruling party, every other party in the New Zealand Parliament, and they seem to have a lot, for a parliament of only like 125 people or so, they seem to have a lot of parties. Every single party is speaking up against this law. The National Party has this coalition with the ruling party, and they have said they don't agree with this piece of legislation either, but what they're going to do is they're going to vote on it to pass first reading and go to committee, but then on second reading, they're going to vote against it, which means that this bill is going to fail. And Thursday was the first reading. They were in the process of calling this vote. The parties had all voted. And then the lady in the video stood up and all this ruckus happened. I want to go now and just cut in a clip from what David said. It sounds reasonable to me. But again, I don't know the legislation all that well. I'm going to link it in the description below so you can go and read it yourself. And maybe it's good and maybe it's not. I'll leave that for you to decide. But what's really interesting is some of the reaction of some of the members of parliament to this are off the rails. And I'm going to play a few clips from that as well. That happened prior to this Haka dance, which is basically a war dance, which is basically a threat. So let's play the clip from David Seymour first.
Where in the world is it a good idea to give citizens different rights based on ancestry? Where in the world has that approach been a success? Dividing people into tangata whenua, land people, and tangata tiriti, people here by dint of the treaty. Mr. Speaker, we can all think of examples where dividing people up by their race or religion has failed badly. It is the time for the body that posed that question in 1975 to say what those principles are. And the purpose of this bill is to break this Parliament's 49 years silence, to define the principles in law so it's crystal clear what the treaty means to modern New Zealanders. Section 6 is the core of the bill. It says the Treaty of Waitangi principles are as follows. Principle 1, the executive government of New Zealand has the full power to govern, and the Parliament of New Zealand has the full power to make laws in the best interests of everyone and in accordance with the rule of law and the maintenance of a free and democratic society. Principle 2, the Crown recognises and will respect and protect the rights that hapu and iwi Māori had under the Treaty of Waitangi, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, at the time they signed it. However, if those rights differ from the rights of everyone, subclause 1 applies only if those rights are agreed in the settlement of a historical treaty claim under the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975.
Just a little bit of order. Thank you very much.
Principle 3 says that everyone is equal before the law. Everyone is entitled without discrimination, the equal protection and the equal benefit of the law and the equal enjoyment of the same fundamental human rights. These principles are based on the 3 articles of Te Tiriti, the Māori text, or at least Professor Kāwharu's 1987 translation of it.
Okay, now that you've seen the David Seymour clip, I'm going to play a couple other clips. One was from a guy named Willy Jackson. And Willy Jackson got kicked out of Parliament for calling David Seymour a liar after, saying shame, shame, shame on you kind of thing. So let's see that.
This is to you, David Seymour. You fuel hatred and misinformation in this country. You bring out the worst in New Zealanders. You should be ashamed of yourself, and you are a liar.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
It's all right. I'm about to rule.
Okay.
Withdraw and apologise for that last statement.
No, I can't do that.
Willie Jackson, I'm asking you to withdraw and apologise for your last statement. And Willie Jackson, are you not going to withdraw for saying something so blatantly unparliamentary as that? It doesn't matter who it came from. You used the term in the House. You made the accusation in the House. Withdraw and apologise. All right, then I'm going to have to ask the member to withdraw himself from the House for the rest of the afternoon.
This one guy, he takes the cake. He's wearing a hat in Parliament, which to me seems kind of bizarre, but okay, they're rules. They can do whatever they want. He takes off his hat to give his speech, and he is completely tattooed on the head. Okay, you know what? That's their culture, Maori culture. They have the ink down the chin and on the head, on the face, whatever. That's fine. But listen to what he said just before finishing his speech.
35,000 people marched yesterday across that bridge, and they will arrive here in Parliament. And one message to you, David, is see you next Tuesday.
So as he finishes his speech, he says to David, see you next Tuesday. And the speaker doesn't respond to that. Maybe the speaker doesn't know what that means. It's not like I'm going to see you next Tuesday. Have a great weekend. No, what it means is you take the CU and those are actually letters of the alphabet. And then next Tuesday, take the first letter of each of those words. Put those 4 letters together. That's what he was referring to. So he swore at David Seymour during Parliament and nothing happened to him. I don't think the speaker understood what this fellow was saying. And this was one of the people who got up and did this haka dance, this threatening war dance just before Parliament was suspended. So why am I talking about New Zealand politics? Partly because I'm happy that Canada isn't the biggest joke when it comes to parliaments in the world. I mean, it's great that there is a more dysfunctional parliament than the Canadian parliament. But also, there's a lesson to be learned here. And that is, how do we treat different segments of our own population? Now, you all know that I'm not really a big fan of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. He did a lot of damage to the country. Not as much as what his son is doing to the country now, but he did a lot of damage to the country. But one thing he did do right was he wrote this white paper, and it was a paper that discouraged collective rights. Basically, he was speaking for individual rights and speaking against collective rights. And it's really important here because of what it symbolizes. When you start giving collective rights to people, which apparently all of these parties in the New Zealand Parliament want, you start making different classes of people. And some people, for whatever reason, think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that everybody within a nation should have the same rights, individual rights, and rights are supposed to be individual. So Pierre Elliott Trudeau got it right when he spoke against collective rights and supported individual rights. But then he went and screwed things up with the Constitution and put limits in the Constitution, specifically in Section 15 of the Constitution, which guarantees people equal protection under the law. And then he goes and he qualifies that by saying, except the government can make programs to ameliorate the disadvantages of disadvantaged people. Essentially saying, yeah, you can have collective rights. And as a result of that, the government has all of these programs that basically disadvantage other people because they give advantages to certain people. I fully believe that the government has a right to allocate resources as they see fit. And if that results in bringing up the standard of living of that area of the country to the same level or to a reasonable level in association to the rest of the country, I think that's great. So yeah, have a program where you put money into infrastructure in remote areas, or where you have education opportunities in remote areas. When you start giving educational opportunities to certain classes of people, though, over and above everybody else, that's a bit of an issue. There's a fine distinction here. You cannot, in my opinion, give more rights to people just because of whatever collective they belong to. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many problems in Canada, because we've done that for decades, well, for centuries, essentially. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to know what you think. Put your comments down below. And while you're at it, please like this video, share with your friends and on social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell notification so you never miss another video. Also, please join me on Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific time for my live stream, where you can join in on the conversation. Finally, I do teach the Canadian firearm safety courses. These are courses which are prerequisites for your Canadian firearms license, also known as a PAL. A PAL is very useful to have, sometimes for employment, but also for hunting and for recreation and just general knowledge. So I encourage everybody to get the training and get a license, because that's the only way you'll actually learn about firearms and firearm safety, because that's what it's all about. So if you want your firearms license and you live on Vancouver Island, or you will be on Vancouver Island for any length of time, I encourage you to look me up. There are links in the description of this video to my website where you can sign up for the Canadian Firearm Safety course. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.